times are definitely speeding.
Okay, and is this a good position for you?
Got it? Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, Debbie, let's start with you. What attracted you to the Kosher Kitchen? Why were you interested in working there? And also, my questions won't be heard, so if you can use part of my question in your answer.
Sure. I came to the Kosher Kitchen because I heard about it, went, had dinner, and fell in love immediately, and immediately raised my hand and said, this is something I want to be a part of. The attraction was multifold. It was people working together. It was working for ideals that I held. It was the Jewish environment that wasn't particularly religiously oriented, but more culturally oriented. My background, I grew up in a family that was socialist, Yiddishist, and I just loved perpetuating that in some way.
Yeah. And Michael, how about you? What attracted you to the Kosher Kitchen, besides the fact that Debbie was there?
No, that is what attracted me to the Kosher Kitchen. Was I never would have found my way to the place had it not been the fact that Debbie was there. So I went to check the place out one day, and I came in, and the space itself used to be a luncheonette, so there was a counter, and I sat down at the counter, and right in front of me was some equipment that I recognized because my father was in the delicatessen business. So I looked at the kitchen equipment. I said, "Oh, these guys have some stuff here. This is pretty good stuff." And then I looked at the menu, and I see they have pastrami on the menu. Okay. So I ordered a pastrami sandwich, and whoever it was who took the order went to the steam table behind them, speared this pastrami, and threw it up on the slicer the wrong way. Now, the fastest way to ruin a piece of meat like that is to cut it the wrong way. Instead of being tender and flaky and flavorful, it's shoe leather or shoelaces, depending on what you do to it. So I yelled at him to stop. And I said, "Get out of the way." I literally pushed him out of the way, washed my hands. I said, "Here's how you do this." And I showed him how to operate a meat slicer. Turns out these people, all of them, for the most part, were vegetarians. And why they decided to open a meat restaurant, not knowing anything about meat, was a little bit surprising. So literally on the spot, I volunteered to show them how to do that side of things in the restaurant.
And Michael became known as Michael Meat because there was another Michael. He was Michael Marcus. So Michael had rather famous distinction.
Okay. Were you, before you heard about, from Alana, before you heard about the Kosher Kitchen, were you dissatisfied with your Jewish identity? Did you feel that the Jewish community was unresponsive to social issues?
So I had been on a journey for a while. I had gone to Israel for a period of time. I came back, went to the University of Maryland. I felt pretty alienated by Hillel, but then Hillel had an alternative house that was more liberal and more student-run called Brei Ra House, and I wound up living there and doing programming there. And actually it was a lovely fit from Brei Ra House to the Kosher Kitchen, because while Brei Ra House served students, this was a broader reach, but it focused on the same liberal issues. The access felt more welcoming. The establishment Jewish community was just a big turnoff. I felt like it was a closed club that I really didn't want to be part of anyway.
Yeah. What were the social issues that mattered to you? Did you see those at the Kosher Kitchen?
I think there were a number of things. First of all, really taking care of people's needs. So I was very attracted to the senior population that lived in the building and the welcoming of that population. Between lunch and dinner, they'd come and share their recipes. We offered them free desserts and tea all afternoon. It really became a community center, and then I was involved with Meals on Wheels In fact, it was as a result of the Kosher Kitchen that I wound up going to social work school and became a gerontologist for the first part of my career.
Wow. You know, one thing I didn't quite understand was physically, I know that it was somewhere near the White Oak Shopping Center, but was it in the ground floor of an apartment building? Or tell me, where was the Kosher Kitchen located?
It was in the basement of a multi-story apartment building, maybe 20 stories.
Yeah, actually, I think there's 2 or 3 buildings. I think you're going
Right.
to go there at some point, okay? There used to be a commercial arcade
Right.
on the ground floor.
So like there was a cleaners. We established ourselves in a coffee shop that had gone out of business. And then as we expanded, we moved to a multi-purpose room, a social hall across the hallway, and used both spaces.
Okay, all right. What was it like working there? Michael, why don't you tell me?
Oh.
What was it like for you to work at the Kosher Kitchen?
It looked like any other restaurant, but it was a lot more fun. The group, as you've probably noticed, there was a tremendous bond, a camaraderie amongst this group that's survived over more than 40 years, that we're still close friends. Of course, Debbie and I ultimately got married a few years later. We've been together 37 years. But having worked in a bunch of restaurants, it was no different. You know, the kitchen was hot, the work was the same. You know, you still have to prepare the food. Orders come in, they come in bunches. You're always in a hurry. There's always something to do in a restaurant. There's no such thing as the quiet time, because when it gets quiet, you got to clean up and get ready for the next rush. So it's just like any other restaurant, but it was more fun.
You know, Ira mentioned that he worked at a restaurant in Times Square, and he said that the bosses of the restaurant, you know, like people are standing 3 or 4 deep to get to the counter.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's working their butts off, except the bosses, who are standing there watching with their arms crossed to make sure no one stole from them. None of the workers would steal from
Right.
them. And I'm just wondering, you know, if you've done restaurant work before, if the Kosher Kitchen was different in that way.
It was, in that I never worked in a place where people were standing 3 or 4 deep at the counter, right? I grew up in New Jersey, and my first restaurant experience was in a diner, and then I worked in a luncheonette sort of business, and then I bussed tables in a high-end, you know, white tablecloth kind of place in suburban New Jersey, where I had to wear a tie and a white shirt, and, you know, very formal, high-end restaurant. And then, of course, my father's delicatessen. So the work, as I said, was the same. And there was supervision in every place I ever worked, but I never got the sense that any boss was ever watching me quite like that, right? But I imagine in New York City and the hustle bustle that place represents, you know, shrinkage and employee theft is probably a very big issue. It's never been an issue in any restaurant I worked in.
All right. But I guess part of what I was asking is that, and this is for both of you, the fact that it was collectively run, the Kosher Kitchen was collectively run, there wasn't any, like, you know, uber boss.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you were all part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And what was that like?
You know, you felt it was onerous at times, because
What was onerous?
the responsibility of being part of a collective. So it wasn't like you could just do your job and go home. You know, supposedly we were to work 40 hours. Well, no one ever worked 40 hours because there was so much to be done. So I think we were far more invested than we would be in any other job. You know, even when you weren't working, it was your life. It was what you were thinking about, you know, figuring out how we could do it better, what some of the issues were, how to deal with those issues. It was 24/7, but worth it because it was ours and we were creating something.
It was very different for me. It was very different for me. I was a volunteer, and I would show up to work a shift, and I would show up, say, an hour before the dinner rush, and I would work through the dinner rush, and I'd be preparing meat for, or meals to be served, or I'd be serving, or I'd be cleaning, or, you know, someone was in charge for each period of time, and that responsibility rotated. Then I would just show up and say, okay, here's what you're going to do today. Okay, and I would just do it, right?
Okay. Some people would say that when the restaurant closed, that meant it was a failure. The restaurant closed, it failed. What do you think about the Kosher Kitchen now, looking back on it? Was it a success or a failure, Debbie? What do you think?
I definitely think it was a success. It planted seeds not only in us, but in our customers. It inspired our children. I think it was a statement that this can be done. It could, your ideals can be lived. You can make a difference.
Michael, yeah, want to add anything?
I would agree it was a success. I never seriously considered stepping up and trying to become a member of that collective, however. And that's because, from my perspective, I didn't think that the business model itself was sustainable. So for me, I had a different agenda for my life going forward. So I never pursued it in that quite that way. I have to admit, I wasn't surprised when it did close. You have a group here that's somewhat unusual, and that they're willing to put themselves forward to try to do this. People like this are, unfortunately, too few and far between to enable an organization like that to refresh itself with new collective membership willing to carry on that model. So I sort of, when I first started working there, had this conversation with Debbie. I don't think this can't last for a very long period of time, because you all are going to burn out or move on, and that's exactly what happened. People got other things that come up in their lives, life moves on, and they couldn't stay there and continue to do that. But I completely agree that it was a success. We touched people. Certainly we touched ourselves, and to some extent to our posterity.
Good. That pretty much wraps it up for me and the questions. Are there any questions I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about?
No,
No?
I think it was very successful. It was definitely a something I've never forgotten, my experience there. One of the thrills of my life really is that I've been able to maintain connections with some of these people over 40 years. I don't think I've seen Billy and Rachel but maybe 4 times in 40 years. And it's just like we were together yesterday. It's great.
Okay. So now we're going off the interview part and going into the scripted part. This is only going to be used for the trailer to raise money.
Okay?
And what I'd like to do is feed you lines, and instead of looking at me, you'll look right into this camera lens here.
That camera lens.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Forget that other camera.
I thought you were pointing at our
Don't look
sound
at
guy.
me. Don't ever look at us.
Don't